This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello. Hi, Bill.
So, what's the big news on NPC Day?
I know you are talking about Liang Hui, but last night a video went viral and that shocked up to 700 million netizens because you know what happened in the subway in Beijing? A 17-year-old boy humiliated two young girls when they were pushing the sales, yet no onlookers ever stepped in to prevent this from happening. This is indeed very embarrassing. Perhaps we should consider seriously whether something should be legislated into law, for example, Good Samaritan spirit. And that reminds me of Lei Feng. Oh, by the way, Bill, you know, today exactly marks the 54th anniversary of Lei Feng, that iconic image of Piao soldiers. Yes, indeed. Perhaps this is time for the lawmakers to consider whether we should be protected if we want to reach out to those who are badly in need.
So there's no reprisal.
But should we go back to the work report?
Let's talk.
The NPC curtain rises Sunday with the Premier Li Keqiang's annual report, which includes the national growth target and a closely watched indication of the leadership's policy on the economy. Clearly, seeking progress while maintaining stability will be the key principle for this year. To discuss the many issues related to this year's government work report and China's economic confidence, I'm joined in the studio by Jorg Henne, Ambassador of Chile to China, and Vincent Lo, a member of the 12th CPPCC. We shall also talk to Martin Jacques, author of When China Rules the World via Satellite. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui.
世界经济增长低迷态势仍在延续，逆全球化思潮和保护主义倾向抬头，主要经济体政策走向及外溢效应变数较大，不稳定、不确定因素明显增加，困难不容低估，信心不可动摇。今年发展的主要预期目标是：国内生产总值增长6.5%左右，在实际工作中争取更好结果；居民消费价格涨幅3%左右；城镇新增就业1100万人以上；城镇登记失业率4.5%以内；进出口回稳向好；国内收支基本平衡；居民收入和经济增长基本同步，单位国内生产总值能耗下降3.4%以上，主要污染物排放量继续下降。
Now, gentlemen, many have followed the work report of Premier Li Keqiang this morning at the Great Hall of the People venue of the NPC opening ceremony. But what do you think should be the most sensational headline?
Well, I would say the most sensational headline is that the numbers that are coming out of the Chinese economy performance in 2016 are very well describe very well what is happening, and the Chinese economy is doing well. 4% unemployment in urban areas is, for all practical purposes, full employment. 6.7% growth, although the lowest in something like 30 years, is still very good. Over half of GDP in the services sector is also very encouraging. So I think these numbers attest to the continued strength of the Chinese economy, despite the challenges it faces.
At the same time, Premier Li Keqiang says over and over in the policy speech this morning that the political leadership in China is pretty unique, with particularly what is called the core values of authoritative leadership being prioritized for Chinese politics. Do you think that this gets featured prominently to make us different from, say, Donald Trump and Brexit, where you see the rise of far-right movement and revolts of populists? What is unique about Chinese politics and leadership that makes China able to achieve 6.7% despite all the adversity of the international circumstances?
I think contrary to the Western belief, the one-party politics in China is the most efficient and effective, because I've been investing into the Chinese economy in the past 30-odd years, and I've seen the changes and the reform and the opening up, and that can only happen when you have continuity in your administration and in the continuity of the policies and also the plans. And I think, in a way, you can say this is like a benevolent dictatorship.
In American politics, however, Mr. Ambassador,
Yes.
they would adopt a traditional approach of anything but Obama, anything but Bush, anything but Clinton, to make them different, to keep a distance from the previous politics and lines. In China, our economy is known for being consistent, starting from the first 5-year plan, second, third, fifth. I mean, now it's 十三五. What do you think of the Chinese characteristics?
Well, I will say this. I've been hearing in Latin America and in Chile for quite some time that the Chinese bubble is about to burst. And this was particularly true in August of 2015, when there was a devaluation of the yuan and the stock market in Shanghai and Shenzhen went down. I've always been, contrary to that view, quite bullish about the Chinese economy. I think any economy that is able to grow at 10% a year for 30 years in a row, something that no economist had forecast would be possible, has something going. And although it is now growing at single-digit rates, it is still doing very well. So obviously, something very interesting, very important is happening in China these days and has been happening for the past 40 years.
Vincent, Premier Li Keqiang promises to create 13 million jobs in the year 2017. Last year, we were able to create, 11 million.
11.
He
Last
says
year,
this year, last year it's 13 million.
yeah.
What would be the driving force for such a tremendous, amazing creation of jobs?
It's the innovation and the entrepreneurship that's been promoted, the Shuangchuang. And I was reading with such great interest and very impressed that every day 15,000 new businesses have been registered in the past year.
That was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
But you'll forget to see many more may have gone bankrupt at the same time. Bankruptcy is
but
pretty
at least
normal.
you have these sort of figures being created every day. I think that's most impressive. And also, even if you look at the figures, since opening up in '78, the economy has grown over 50 times. That's a miracle.
And what's the percentage of China contribution to the world economic growth over
It's
the past
been
3
over
years?
30% since 2013.
So,
Now, Premier Li Keqiang also vows to downsize the bureaucratic apparatus. Is it possible to rationalize the government functions?
It's very difficult. I have certain skepticism, but at least this year, he wrote in his work report that he wants to reduce the central government department's general expenditure by 5% this year. I think that is a very strong signal that he wants to achieve this.
I know you hate to make comments on Chinese politics, however, we are undertaking deep reform comprehensively in what we call deep waters. It means it's going to be a painful process of downsizing the government. What will be the most challenging issues for Premier Li Keqiang and indeed President Xi Jinping to fight and push back the influence of interest groups? I mean, how bad, how detrimental would the interest groups be?
well, again, these are very tricky issues. But my own view is that one of the most critical areas is downsizing over capacity. in the steel and coal sector. That, it seems to me, is a critical element, and it's very difficult because it means getting rid of jobs, it means closing factories in areas of the country that are not doing that well. But in the end, you know, and economists whom I respect very much say that that is really the only way forward. But for the obvious reasons, it's very tough and very difficult. It creates tensions between central government and the provinces, tensions between the provincial governments and local municipalities and the people themselves. So these are tough measures, but you know, a lot of people say that they should be taken.
These days, what makes headlines on BBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox News in domestic politics of the United States is President Donald Trump is facing a whole formidable army of the staff in the White House. The career bureaucrats are fighting this newly elected president. They don't like him, and he therefore accused President Obama of conspiring with his staff left behind. In China, in sharp contrast with American politics, we see consensus. We see solidarity that is badly needed for making decisions. Now, let's look at the specifics concerning policymaking, decapacity, deleveraging, destocking. These are the avowed goals of Premier Li Keqiang. Do you think he got the mandate from above, the boss of him, or from below, the constituency?
I think that's probably a consensus building decision that he can push ahead with this, because like the ambassador said, there's so much resistance. And when you want to reduce capacity, how are you going to deal with the labor that will be laid off? When you do the deleveraging, maybe the banks, somebody will be hurt. And then when you do the destocking, who's going to pay?
There'll be more ghost cities.
Yes, all these, I think, will create resistance for the central government. But the decision to push ahead with this is very strong. And I can see from the Premier's report that this coming year, a lot will still be done here. Like, for example, the steel production. Another 50 million metric tons will be reduced this year. Coal production, 150 million tons will be reduced this year. Last year was 45 million tons for steel and 280 million tons for coal. So these are very, very substantial figures that we're looking at.
Right. How to deepen our reform of the SOE? I mean, this is what is called by Premier Li Keqiang in Chinese 断腕求生. That's going to be tough, very painful. But you are watching Dialogue with His Excellency, the Ambassador of Chile to China, and Vincent Lo, CPPCC member for 20 years. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break. Hi, I'm among 800 million users of WeChat and have been on this most crazy social media networking every day. Dynamic interactions here in the friend circle are actually based on trust, privacy, and the readiness to share one's thoughts, feelings, and fun. The pull and the push of the Lianghui agenda invites discussions on very sharp social and world issues. Please join me in pursuing this very intellectual pleasure. Well, many thanks for the whole team behind me who's been so integrated deeply with the social media, collecting informed opinions and responsible opinions about social and economic progress that this government promises to make in the years ahead. Just now, more of my friends have joined our discussion on the social media. Wang Wen, for example, Dean of Chongyang Institute, Renmin University, says in the past, the world has underestimated China's contribution to global governance. He says China will be a contributor to world economic growth and a protector of the global system. He says we must offer the Chinese solution to the world issue of global governance. Now, Professor Zhang Xingang, former president of City University of Hong Kong, thinks highly of the metaphor Premier Li used, 化蛹成蝶 in Chinese, which describes how a caterpillar breaks out of the dark and enclosed cocoon to become a butterfly. It appropriately can be used to describe the current process of upgrading and transforming the Chinese economy by the rather painful process of supply reforms. Well, these are the opinions we collected from the social media, particularly from my friend circle of WeChat. Now, welcome back to our studio discussion here. We've been talking about the decapacity and the redundant workers. They are made jobless as a result. These are the painful parts of restructuring the economy. Are you aware that we're going to survive this period of restructuring?
Well, the key, it seems to me, in this process is to provide retraining opportunities for people that have to change jobs. In the old times, people would have lifetime jobs. In today's world, what a globalized world is all about, that no longer holds. So people must be ready to retrain and acquire new skills that will allow them to work in the new economy. In a way, the resistance towards globalization that we're seeing in the United States today, that we're seeing in Europe, responds to that, because people are left jobless but without the skills to acquire the new jobs that are in demand. There is no lack of job offers. What there is a lack of is the skilled personnel needed to fill those jobs.
I'm actually a bit concerned about the retraining side, because these blue-collar workers, it's very difficult to retrain them. They haven't got the education background and they might be a bit too old.
And they are the losers in the Chinese Rust Belt in the competition, which is very tough, right?
Yes, it is tough. And that is why I think it's so critical that we create more service jobs. Some of the lower service jobs, maybe these people can try and adapt themselves to it. But to try and retrain them to do another job, I think it's very difficult to do a desk job or anything like that.
Let me go back to the most fundamental concern about the sustainability and the resilience of the Chinese economy in the year ahead. Let me cross over to Martin Jacques. Hello. Now, the annual government work report set the GDP growth target at around 6.5%. What's your expectation for the GDP growth?
Well, I think that 6.5% is probably very realistic. I mean, actually, I agree with your point that the Chinese economy has, in a period of great change, both domestically and indeed globally, has been very resilient. And so I think that 6.5% is realistic. But I have one caveat to that, and that is we'd certainly live in uncertain times because of the election of Trump and the kind of noises he's made. And I think this could be, this could have, and we don't know what's going to happen, but this could have a significant downward pressure on the ability to achieve that 6.5%.
Well, both service industry and urbanization go over 50%. That means spending-led growth will be prioritized on the agenda of Premier Li Keqiang and President Xi Jinping. So, to make this possible, China vows to maintain stable economic development and the environment for social harmony this year to ensure a successful party congress in the autumn. Do stability and growth contradict each other? I mean, when liberty, individual liberty and political order seem to be on the collision course, what do you think should be the most important to ensure sustainability of the Chinese economy?
Well, I mean, actually, so far, the Chinese development over the last few years has been impressive in both combining a decent growth rate, I mean, not as big as it used to be, but by global standards, extremely impressive, and at the same time has been, you know, social stability has been really impressive in China over this period. Now, what is true is that, and your guests have been talking about this, and I agree with much of what they said, that the difficulty is going to be contraction in the old industries like steel and coal. And this is that, I mean, and this is always geographically concentrated. For example, you know, northeast China is heavily, the provinces there are very heavily affected by this. So how to handle that in terms of stability is going to be very important. I mean, those industries are contracting, other industries are expanding, some of them very rapidly. And I think that the key question here, and I underline what's been said here, is the question of retraining. I mean, if I look at what happened to Britain in the Thatcher period, or what happened in the United States when there was a great deal of deindustrialization and all sectors were contracted, you know, the retraining was totally inadequate. And if you come to Britain now, and I showed you around Britain, where the old industries were concentrated, they've never recovered these areas.
Well, thank you very much.
People, you know, maybe.
Martin, next question is about FDI, foreign direct investment, FDI. I mean, do you think with the rise of labor costs and commodity prices, overseas multinationals would still prefer to make investment here in China? What do you think of the opportunities here, very quickly?
I think that the opportunities are still very strong, but of course the way in which the foreign companies view the Chinese market is constantly shifting because the Chinese economy is shifting. So you know, so previous forms of investment may not be so appropriate. So the question is really is their ability to invest and move with the new areas, and I don't see any reason why, in principle, that they can't do that. And there's, I mean, once upon a time, the attraction of China was essentially cheap labour. Now, increasingly, it's the size of the domestic market, which wasn't such an attraction.
Thank you very much, Martin.
And I think they can do this.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Premier Li Keqiang also spoke of the Belt and Road Initiative in the government work report. I know you've been working very hard to promote this idea through your own financing vehicles, and Hong Kong is of course known for being the financial center, despite the tough competitions coming from Singapore, Tokyo and Shanghai. What do you think of the future of the Belt and Road Initiative?
It's really such an important initiative for the whole world. It's actually rebalancing the whole world. The Belt and Road Initiative is covering 65 countries, 4.4 billion people. The population is 61% of the world's population, but the GDP is only 29%. So there's a lot of upside, and there are a lot of inequalities there. So what President Xi Jinping is promoting, I think, is so critical for the world's security and peace going forward. And I believe, though, this should not be just a China project, because there's no way China can handle this on its own. There's no way China can afford to invest on its own. So what we are trying to do in Hong Kong is that we want to build an objective, neutral, market-oriented platform to integrate the world's resources to go into the Belt and Road countries. And I believe it's working, because I'm now championing this process in Hong Kong through the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. We have 46 offices all around the world, and we have 28 along the Belt and Road countries. So we are very well equipped to do that, and we also one country, two systems. So Hong Kong can play that financial center, back office role for the Belt and Road.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Yes. When President Xi visited South America last November at the APEC summit in Lima, he invited countries in Latin America to look for ways to be part of this initiative. You know, and we have put on the table a project of a trans-Pacific internet fiber optic cable from China to Chile, which is one example of the sort of things that can be done. But there is a very important forum that will be held here in Beijing in May on Belt and Road, and more than 20 heads of state will be participating in it. We are very excited. President Michelle Bachelet, the Chilean president, has been invited to participate, and we look forward to a very wide-ranging debate as to how we in South America can also take part in this very important infrastructure project.
Externally, you're going to, let me say this way, you're going to play host to a seminar this year in your capital city to talk about trans-Pacific trade during the absence of American leadership that be to retreat from TPP. Do you think the idea of RCEP is likely to take it over? Because the Japanese are especially concerned about China filling the power vacuum. Will that be true?
Well, yes, this will take place 10 days from now, 14, 15 March, in Viña del Mar, a resort near Santiago. We are very keen to continue to push for trans-Pacific trade. So there are various projects on the table. One of them is the TPP, although the United States will not be part of it. Other is the RCEP. Another is the FTAAP. Our position is, let's get an exchange going among all the concerned parties. There'll be 14 countries around the table, from Latin America, from Australasia, and from Asia, and see how we can continue to push for free trade in the most dynamic part, the most dynamic area of the world. It seems to me, with what has happened with the TPP, we are a bit at a dead end on how to move forward. And it is important to keep the ball rolling. RCEP is one alternative. FTAP, which may take some more time, is another. Now, we believe in what I call variable geometry. These things are not necessarily incompatible. Perhaps there are ways they can complement each other. But the main thing is to get the discussion going and to work together.
The United States is currently absent from TPP to the dismay of the Japanese government. Shinzo Abe therefore made 2 visits to Washington to sound out what's going to happen next without the U.S. leadership. He might be a little bit too pessimistic. Let's look at the worst case scenario that could take place between the United States and China. For example, we have replaced Canada to become the biggest trading partner of the United States. And yet President Donald Trump vows to milk China ruthlessly so that he's going to do the business his own way, like a businessman of Wall Street. Now, do you foresee very brutal trade war between the 2 biggest economies in the world?
I don't believe trade wars will happen, but there definitely will be conflicts. I've worked with President Trump in the 90s, and I think we're in for a very uncertain time. But definitely, I think on the trade war side, I'm more optimistic. But I'm more concerned about the world globalization and world peace.
What do you think would be the most challenging issues in the BIT negotiations between the United States and China? Do you think President Trump will go ahead with an ED, strategic and economic dialogue, to sustain the healthy development in trade and investment?
The impression I have is that there are several positions at work within the administration of Mr. Trump, and that there are sectors, say within the State Department and elsewhere, USTR, I would think, that are pushing for continuing to develop the sort of links that in investment and trade that need to be developed between the world's 2 largest economies. So my impression is that there is still an ongoing debate within the administration on how to move forward on China.
Thank you very much. Particularly my thanks go to Vincent Lo, who's been involved in our discussion each year, annually, without exceptions. He's been member of CPPCC for 2 decades. I know this is the last time for you to appear on our program in the capacity of the CPPCC member from Hong Kong. I thank you so much for your support of the program.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And I believe our path will cross.
Yes.
Until next time, goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.